In the brutal theater of the Cold War, Western intelligence discovered a terrifying radar signature that sent shockwaves through the Pentagon. Deep inside Soviet territory, a mysterious aircraft was flying faster and higher than anything the West had ever seen. On radar screens, it looked like an absolute phantom, a massive steel monster powered by two giant turbojet engines that could quite literally melt themselves for speed. This was the Mikoyan-Gurevich MiG-25 Foxbat, a cold-blooded interceptor built with one impossible top-secret purpose: to hunt down and destroy America's untouchable spy plane, the SR-71 Blackbird. For years, the West panicked, believing the Soviets had achieved absolute air supremacy with a superweapon that defied Western engineering. But behind its terrifying speed lay a web of shocking engineering secrets, cheap materials, and desperate compromises. Welcome back to the Iron Blueprint. To understand the terror of the Foxbat, you have to travel back to the late 1960s, a time when American supersonic bombers and spy planes operated with complete impunity. The U.S. was developing the Mach 3 B-70 Valkyrie and actively flying the legendary SR-71 Blackbird at 85,000 feet. Soviet air defenses were utterly helpless. Missiles couldn't reach them, and existing Soviet fighters would stall out and choke in the thin air of the upper atmosphere. The Kremlin needed a radical solution, a machine that could climb to the edge of space in minutes and intercept a target flying at 3 times the speed of sound. When Western satellite reconnaissance photos first captured images of the MiG-25 at a classified airbase, military analysts were horrified. Looking at its massive, giant wings, the West made a critical mistake. They assumed this was a highly maneuverable air superiority fighter that could outturn any American jet. This single misunderstanding triggered a massive panic in the United States, forcing the Pentagon to accelerate the development of the F-15 Eagle just to counter this Soviet ghost. The West thought they were looking at the future of aviation. They had no idea what was actually hidden under the paint. When Soviet engineers began designing an aircraft capable of sustained Mach 3 flight, they immediately ran into a brick wall: intense atmospheric friction. At those speeds, air friction creates temperatures exceeding 300 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt standard military-grade aluminum. The Americans solved this problem on the SR-71 by building it entirely out of titanium, a metal so rare that the CIA had to covertly buy it from the Soviet Union itself through front companies. But the Soviets faced a dilemma. They did not have the advanced precision industrial manufacturing capabilities to mass-produce complex titanium components. So the chief designer made a shocking, brutalist decision. Instead of titanium, the MiG-25 Foxbat would be built almost entirely out of nickel-steel alloy, essentially heavy stainless steel. Over 80% of the Foxbat's airframe was welded together by hand on assembly lines. This crude solution solved the heat problem, but it created a massive penalty: weight. The MiG-25 became an absolute flying anvil, weighing over 20 tons empty. To push this massive block of steel through the sound barrier, Soviet engineers couldn't rely on elegant aerodynamics. They had to use brute, terrifying force. To make 20 tons of stainless steel fly at Mach 3, the Soviets installed the largest turbojet engines ever fitted to a fighter aircraft, the twin Tumansky R-15. These engines were massive monsters, originally designed for high-altitude supersonic cruise missiles. They gulped down jet fuel at a terrifying rate, burning through tons of propellant in minutes. But the brute force engineering didn't stop at the engines. While American jets were transitioning to delicate, advanced microprocessors and fragile silicon transistors, the Soviets looked at the threat of an American nuclear strike and chose a completely different path. They equipped the MiG-25 with vacuum tube electronics. Its giant radar system operated on vacuum tubes, generating a massive 600 kilowatts of raw power. Rumors spread that the radar beam was so powerful it could quite literally kill rabbits on the runway. But this crude technology was a stroke of genius. Vacuum tubes were completely immune to the devastating electromagnetic pulse of a nuclear blast, and they could operate perfectly under extreme cockpit temperatures without needing heavy cooling systems. It was heavy, it was loud, but it was virtually indestructible. Despite its terrifying appearance, the MiG-25 was a weapon bound by fatal limitations. Its massive weight meant it could not turn or dogfight. Any sharp maneuver at high speeds would structurally warp the steel airframe or pull the wings clean off. But its greatest flaw lay deep within its roaring engines. The Foxbat was officially rated for a maximum speed of Mach 2.8. However, in 1971, a US military radar tracked a Soviet MiG-25 flying over Israel at an incredible speed of Mach 3.2. The West was stunned. But what American intelligence didn't know was that the flight was a total suicide mission for the aircraft. At Mach 3.2, the air rushing into the massive Tumansky engines was so violent that the fuel pumps couldn't control the flow. The engines suffered from a terrifying phenomenon called thermal runaway. They essentially became ramjets, burning out of control. The pilot survived and landed safely, but the engines were completely melted and turned into useless scrap metal. The fastest jet in the Soviet arsenal could only reach its true top speed once, before completely destroying itself. The grand illusion of the Foxbat finally shattered in September 1976, when a disgruntled Soviet pilot named Viktor Belenko flew his MiG-25 through a gap in radar coverage and defected to Japan. For the first time, Western engineers completely disassembled the terrifying Soviet superweapon piece by piece. They found the crude hand welding, the heavy steel plates, the vacuum tubes, and realized the truth. The MiG-25 was not a maneuverable dogfighter, but a desperate single-purpose interceptor designed to fly in a straight line, fire its missiles, and go home. Yet despite its flaws, the Foxbat achieved its mission. The SR-71 Blackbird never flew inside Soviet airspace again. To this day, the MiG-25 holds the absolute world altitude record for a jet aircraft, reaching an astonishing 118,000 feet. It remains a historic monument to a forgotten era of military engineering, a testament to what can happen when you mix raw steel, brute atomic age force, and absolute desperation. Thank you for supporting the Iron Blueprint. Subscribe for more deep dives into the ultimate machines of war. Welcome to the Elite Squad, and thank you for supporting the Iron Blueprint.